This is a story about love, loss, and the long road back to light. My son Ryder was born still after what seemed to be a healthy, full-term, uneventful pregnancy. Nothing prepared us for that day or for everything that followed. In this podcast, I'll take you through the moments leading up to his passing, the immediate aftermath, and the reality of learning how to survive something that feels impossible to survive. I'll show you how I slowly found my footing again, how joy eventually made its way back into my life, and where I am today. This is not medical advice, and I'm not a therapist or healthcare professional. These are my experiences, my perspectives, and my truth. If you are walking a similar path, I encourage you to seek guidance from your care providers and find what works best for you. But this is my story, and if you're here, I hope that somewhere within it, you find a little bit of hope. Coming home without Ryder was surreal in every way. As I mentioned before, looking into that back seat, driving home from the hospital, just felt so foreign, unnatural. I can't really put it or articulate it into words. It felt so gross, so grotesque. It's hard to explain unless you've done it, unless you've left the hospital with a loved one not coming home with you. It doesn't necessarily, I don't think it needs to be a newborn child. It could be a loved one, brother, sister, parent, whatever. I think just it feels so empty when you have to do that. And that was 100% our situation. I don't think Anna and I spoke the entire ride home. I think we both just stared out the windshield. I feel like I didn't even blink on that ride. It was almost a catatonic state. Like, we got home, I drove safe, but it was very robotic, is really the only way I can explain it. The next few days are not at all what a parent imagines when they're expecting a newborn. We got home from the hospital after a few hours. I was putting some things into what was supposed to be Ryder's bedroom, and I noticed a book on the nightstand, which was called Wherever You Are, My Love Will Find You, and broke down. My wife came in. I showed her the book, and we sat there. We cried in each other's arms for I don't know how long. But this was another one of those moments where I felt something, someone, Ryder, God, whoever, whatever it might be, was looking down at us, sending us a message, showing us that Ryder was there, that he loved us, that he felt our presence, that we felt his presence. It was a sign. Like, signs are what they are. And so that was super meaningful, super impactful. Still kind of carry that near and dear. I actually have those words, wherever you are, my love will find you, tattooed on my forearm, kind of around Ryder's footprints. It was a healing moment in the first several days after losing him. It was kind of like one of the first healing moments that we had. And then life starts happening around you. Our parents were there. Well, my dad had already passed, so my mom was there with my aunt. Ann's parents were there. Her sister was there. Of course, they're trying to get us to eat. And I remember distinctly, college basketball was on, March Madness was on, and Iowa was playing. So the family was glued to that game and cheering for the team. And in my head, I was like, well, how are we watching and cheering on basketball right now? It just felt so insignificant, so unimportant. They weren't wrong for doing it. Not mad at them, was never mad at them. But I remember being like, why? why do we care in this moment? But I remember them trying to feed us. And there was pizza at the house. I was leaning up against the kitchen sink. My sister-in-law, Laura, gave me a plate of pizza. And in my mind, I grabbed the plate and threw it against the wall, broke the window, broke the plate. Pizza went everywhere. Glass went everywhere. And then I snapped back to reality. And I was standing there with the plate. It reminded me of a scene from Fight Club where the main character would lose focus, sitting at his desk, snap, start destroying everything, beating up people, and then they cut back and he'd still be sitting at his desk staring off into space. I feel like this happened to me a lot over the first several days, few weeks. I would have these breaks. I don't want to say breaks in reality. I wasn't losing my mind, but I think my brain was coping with things in the only way it knew how. Like I was holding it together for my wife, for myself, for the family. I was not crying a lot and was an emotional wreck. I was more stoic in a lot of areas, but it was messing with me. I think it really was. I was having these breaks. Honestly, that's what they were. They were mental breaks in which my mind would take me somewhere else in that moment where I'd be doing the same exact thing, but I'd flip out, smashing things, breaking things, and then I'd snap back to reality. And I think it's like subconsciously, like I wanted to do those things, but I knew that I couldn't. So my brain was just doing them for me. Again, not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. So don't know what or why it was happening. Don't know what it would be called, but that was my reality during those days. A few days after coming home, we had to go to the funeral home and start preparing for what we wanted to do for Ryder. And that's surreal in and of itself. Like to be going from expecting your first child a handful of days prior and then talking about funeral homes and what we're going to do, like that was so messed up, but it's where we were. And so I remember going to the funeral home, and the funeral home by us was massive. And we walked in and they were so kind, so empathetic. And they were really in the series of events that led us to having to go to the funeral home. It's disgusting to say this, but the funeral home is almost a bright spot in our story to this point, in that they were so incredibly caring and delicate with us and with Ryder, to the point to where I mentioned that woman coming into the hospital room and asking us about the physician and things and how she got flustered and left. And we didn't fill out that paperwork. Well, this is where it comes back to, again, it's another event where the hospital let us down. So we are sitting there and we're talking about our son, and his name is Ryder James and all of the things. And you can see the funeral home director kind of start to get a little uncomfortable, in that I think, if I'm reading between the lines, and I've never asked, so I don't know. So this is my version of what happened, and trying to speak for a person that's not here on this podcast, will never be here on this podcast, will never hopefully speak to again. But knowing what I know, and if I had to think through this and put it into words from their perspective, I think they were expecting a mother and father to show up that, I don't want to say that didn't care, but that wasn't going to be having a memorial or making decisions. I think they thought that we were going to come in and be very direct, minimalist, in that cremation, no urn. Like I don't even want to guess as to like what they thought we were going to do. But I guess what it comes down to is that person that was supposed to do the paperwork did not do their job. And so the hospital, when they sent Ryder to the funeral home, when they released Ryder to the funeral home, it was baby Mendelke, not even baby boy. Like they didn't give the funeral home the sex of the baby, nor any information that the child had a name. And so the conversation switched from business to like, oh, I need to tell these people that there may be some other areas where this hospital messed up. And so they very politely, I think they actually another woman came in. So there were two of them, and they were like, hey, this has never happened to us before, but this is how your child was released to us. It was baby Mendelke. Here's the paperwork. And it just doesn't match what you're saying. We are saying it's Ryder James and all of these things. So they were having to change paperwork. And when your child is born still, when Ryder, there's not a birth certificate and a death certificate. It's called a fetal demise certificate. And so, which is another thing that I never needed to know or learn in my life, but here I am. And so all of these things needed to be changed. They're legal documents. And if we wanted him to be represented the right way, which was very important to us, we needed to go through these hoops now to fix this. And so the funeral home took care of all of that, but they were very clear that this had never happened to them before. This is not how things were done. This was a problem. And so they helped us fix all of those things. But that was the first time where I really was like, something happened here. Something is wrong. Like, this isn't one mistake, or yeah, maybe this does happen and it can lead to death and all of those things. But like, the ambulance took its time. It was not going emergent. Took us to the wrong area of the hospital. They moved us rooms. It was well over an hour from the time I called 911 to when they first checked Ryder's vital signs. And then there's this paperwork incident, and now it's at the funeral home. So these things start piling up, and we leave the funeral home, and my wife and my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law are both nurses. So they are very empathetic to the nurses, and the nurses again were fantastic. And so we need to, send flowers or cards and thank yous to the nursing staff. Like, they were fantastic. And I was like, no, we don't. Let's slow our roll here. Like, we need to stop everything that we're doing. Like, there seems to be a pattern here of mistakes or missteps or lack of urgency, a lack of care, lack of compassion. So while these individuals were great, the entire experience from start to finish has been horrific, and something is wrong here. And so I made calls to attorneys' offices, and we got response back very quickly, essentially saying, yep, none of this stuff adds up. Here's what we need to do. And so they gave me kind of my marching orders for the day, which unfortunately was to order an autopsy for Ryder. And that was a traumatic experience in and of itself. I handled that on my own that day. I took it upon myself to reach out to the medical examiner, the coroner's office, and to start going through that process. I also needed to call the funeral home to let them know that this is what we were going to do, that we were holding off on the cremation. And they agreed with that. So they were very helpful. They put everything, they stopped everything. They reached out to the coroner's office. They had Ryder transferred, all of those things. But in order to get an autopsy, after the cause of death has been determined, and that was closed at the hospital, and we did not challenge it at the hospital, we did not ask for an autopsy at the hospital, there was all sorts of red tape that needed to be, all sorts of hoops, all sorts of red tape that needed to be dealt with. And so I spent, I think, 8 or 9 hours on the phone that day with the medical examiner's office. And at first they were very unhelpful. I will say that. They didn't know what we were trying to accomplish. They were very clear that they could not change the cause of death, that they very unlikely to open these things, that it need to go through a system of approvals, and they needed to get a medical examiner to agree to take it and do the autopsy after the fact. There were all these conversations, and they were not very helpful. However, during one of the conversations over the course of several hours that day, the woman on the phone asked about the cause of death and what had happened. And so I had said that Ryder had a velamentous cord insertion that ruptured. That eventually led to his demise. That is not what was in the official record. They had said that the mother had passed a blood clot that had some way, shape, or form. I don't remember exactly what it was, but that the mother had passed the blood clot which somehow led to the death of Ryder. And so it was in that moment when I think she was like, velamentous cord insertion. Can you spell that? What is it? So I did that for her. And then she was like, that's not what we have here. And it was in that moment that the conversation changed. She put me on hold. She had other conversations. She told me she'd call me back. She'd call me back. And there was just back and forth for, again, several hours in the day. Then she called back and said that they would agree to do this, that the records that were given to them and what the doctors had told us were completely conflicting, that the coroner, the medical examiner, would not change the cause of death. So they needed to know exactly what we were trying to prove, which was that Ryder was a normal, healthy baby, that there was no underlying cause, no underlying disease, no underdeveloped organs, anything like that would have caused his death outside of this event. So they said that they could do that, but they would not change the cause of death because that was already kind of signed, sealed, delivered, whatever. So they would agree to do the autopsy, but they needed to walk me through kind of what that meant, which I will spare everyone the details, but I had to agree to what they were going to do to our son. And I think science is fantastic. These things are needed. It was certainly needed here. I have pity and compassion, empathy, all of the words, all of the things for anyone who has ever had to make these decisions and was given the information, whether it be an autopsy, organ donation, any of these things. Losing a child or a loved one is hard enough, but then to have the discussion and knowing what the procedure entails, I mean, some of that information is also horrific. And so that was very difficult, but ultimately we needed to make that decision. And so we did get that autopsy, and they did come back and say that there was no underlying cause of death. He was a normal, healthy, fully grown baby that outside of this event should have survived. So we did take that information and we did follow down the legal path, which I will not discuss in this series, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. I cannot discuss those issues, but we did go down that route, which took several years. But anyway, going into the next several days, it was hard. There were a lot of logistical things that the anger was swelling up inside us. The reality of not having our son with us was starting to hit. I think for Anne, it was immediate. And in a lot of ways, it was for me too. But Anne was the one that was pregnant. She felt Ryder growing inside of her. She could feel the baby move. She felt the kicks and all of those things. It was with her. He was with her 24/7 for 9+ months. I did not have that. I had gone to most of the appointments. We had been to doctors and out of doctors throughout the pregnancy and never came home with the baby. And so while I understood the reality, in some ways it was almost like, oh, we didn't bring the baby home today, but next time we go to the next appointment, we'll bring Ryder home with us. Like it's going to be fine. Like I think there was somewhere in my mind, there was like that math was going on that just, it didn't make sense to anyone, not even to myself. But I think there was that protection was up somewhere, somehow, that we didn't come home with a baby today, but we'll come home next time. Like, cause that was normal. We went to a lot of appointments and never came home with a baby. So how is this any different? I think I was shielding myself for a little bit, but it started to sink in, and then it was just sad. It was just sadness. And it was part of everything we did and did not do. If we watched a show and it touched there was a baby or touched a pregnancy or whatever, we had to stop and we couldn't move forward. If we went, the first time we went to the grocery store, not even the grocery store, we went to Target. And this was right around Easter. And so we went to Target, and of course, Target is promoting Easter. Everybody is, but you don't realize that all of that stuff, it would have been baby's first Easter, all the Easter baskets, all of that stuff was all front and center when you walk in. And there was a moment for Anna and myself where we were like, oh shit, everything baby is in our face. Like everything that was supposed to be our life as of March 22nd is staring at us. That didn't happen. So the first Easter basket, the joy, all of those things that we were supposed to be experiencing, we weren't going to get that. And there was this real reminder as soon as we walked in. And then it was like, all right, close your eyes, keep your head down, just get the milk or whatever you needed and get out of the store. But we realized that there were going to be these triggering events and these reminders, these indicators everywhere that we would never have anticipated. And I think a normal, I don't want to say normal, but the average person in this country, at least, where all of this stuff is jammed down our throats, would never look at these things as triggering events or traumatic. The world is not built for people who have lost children, that have trouble with pregnancy and infertility, that want babies and cannot have them. There are reminders of these losses, and they're all losses. They are all traumatic. There are these reminders and these triggers everywhere. And they don't happen for everyone. But if you are in this space, if you are part of this lost community that so many people are a part of, there are just things everywhere that is a kick to the gut. And this was that was our first experience in one of those moments. And again, those things are everywhere. And so I'll leave this episode at that. And next episode, we will dive into some of those gut punches and where they came up, whether they be situations like this or people and who showed up, who didn't. But there are these reminders everywhere.